Hi, I'm Rajesh Nair. I'm a physicist, electrical engineer, product designer. I studied electronic product design, uh, master's, and then went to study manufacturing and mechanical engineering at UMass. This is all long back. Been a product designer for multiple companies and started designing hundreds of products. Started four companies, three of them in manufacturing uh, across Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and uh, then went back to school at MIT. My primarily I had a fellowship from Mr. Ratan Tata, and his call was to study and create something that can transform communities, primarily in the developing countries. And my work was to see if we can change children in schools and universities to become innovators and entrepreneurs so that they can change the community, create wealth, create jobs, etc. After that, I was a professor at Asia School of Business. We actually started Asia School of Business. It was started by MIT, my advisor at MIT, and I was one of the starting faculty there. We three of them went and started that. Uh, then I started my company primarily in education based on my work in working with school kids. Now I actually am visiting professor at Ehime University in Japan. Primarily, they're implementing my methodology across the prefecture of Ehime to transform schools and universities to become innovation and entrepreneurship beehives. So I just wanted to quickly show you my work for the past almost 14 years. Uh, the goal is, can we create innovators and entrepreneurs from these underserved communities to current schools and such. Most schools currently they're all, well, our education system currently is a teaching system. It's not a learning system where uh, we give them information from when they're first grade all the way till they graduate uh, to memorize and write exams. But the innate ability that they're born with, that the innate exploratory learning ability, that is, and the curiosity, the courage to go figure things out, all those things are completely subdued over time because of the education system itself, because we kind of put blinders on them to learn only what is taught, because that's what coming in the exam. And we lose, these kids lose their ability over time to do things outside. And my research primarily shows that we peak at about 10 years and kind of start to fade after 15. The school system kind of starts to put the cloud over you. So my work primarily is in how do you start to change that. And this was my research at MIT, and I continued my research at Asia School of Business and NCube Lab, which stands for Entrepreneurship Incubation Lab, is what I currently I do a lot of outreach through that. So the question is, are entrepreneurs born or made? I truly believe they can be made. Anyone can be made into an entrepreneur. So, but when I say an entrepreneur, it's not that you have to go start a company. It is the basic skills that let you find a problem, create a solution, and execute and implement something to make a difference. How could you take leadership and do all these things? And those skills make you a better employee, could be a better community leader, or even a startup guy. So interestingly, we are all born with these innate abilities, which are dormant in us. Most of us kind of lose it over time. Uh, and some gather enough courage to believe they could be entrepreneurs. They can do these kind of things, aspire to be entrepreneurs. And some go out and do it for the first time. The nascent ones, some of them do it multiple times. So if you look at the entrepreneurship programs anywhere in the world, they start with those who have put their hand up saying, I have an idea, or I have a startup product, I have a solution, or whatever. And interestingly, that's only about maybe 2% of the population. But we spend so much time and effort in transforming the 2% of aspiring entrepreneurs into 1% or 0.05% of real people who actually go out and start companies, while we miss out on the 98%. And my primary focus is on these folks. How do we transform this 98%, which can completely deluge a community with entrepreneurs that can completely transform them? But we currently are only cherry picking from the lowest hanging fruit. And how do we start to instead farm them, and do that, if I can put it that way? So the process is primarily creating pre-entrepreneurs right at school, building these skills and mindsets and confidence and aspiration very early on in their school ages. So if you can change the life trajectory of a child at 10 years, you could actually put them at a very, very different place as you go later. So the framework primarily starts with picking up the 98%, the zeros, the uninitiated. And the first stage is to uh, transform them into makers. Makers are the ones who can create things. They're like, how do you build their curiosity, their courage to learn, go out and figure out things that they currently do not know? How do you build their confidence, their self-efficacy, and more than anything, their self-learning skills? And that is one of the superpowers. If a kid can build that self-learning skills, that can completely transform them. So I used to run these 2-day programs in schools as part of my research, where you go bring these high school students and teach them design, mechanical design, electronics, coding, all these kind of things, to give them the spatial understanding, system design kind of concepts, logic thinking, all these things put together. It's not just teaching technology, it is primarily to bring all these systems thinking and intelligences together. So this kid was making a automatic baby cradle. When you put the baby in there, it senses it and then start to rock the baby. But of course, none of it solves any problem. Primarily, goal is to bring all these kind of disciplines together and start to realize that you can actually do a lot more than what the school really teaches. These are 13, 14-year-old, 13, 15-year-old children in Malaysia. We took a string of LEDs and they were making a messaging wand. You can see the pride on her face, of what he had done. These are sixth graders in Ho Chi Minh City, where they make this robot that kicks a ball and goalpost that scores goals. Again, everything that you see there was CADed and 3D printed in the 2 days. And they have to make a movie, they have to make a presentation, and all those things. And the question is, what is so special about these children? There's nothing so special. They just got an opportunity to learn, and they realize that they can learn well beyond what the schools kind of expose them to. And the next stage of development is being an innovator. Innovator needs to find problems. How do you find unmet human needs, through engaging with people? And once you find the problem, can you use critical thinking, problem solving skills to get to the solution and develop things that work? You know? And the last stage is that of an entrepreneur. Now that you have found a problem to work on, how do you transform it into opportunity? How do you create a solution that is viable and feasible and such, that they can offer to the customer? You know, Everyone is a systems thinker. A maker thinks inside the product. They're a product system thinker. Primarily most engineers are product system thinkers. They think inside the technology, or how things work and how things are made. Uh, Innovators are problem system thinkers. They look at what's the problem, who creates, what's the value and pain, and how do you address it, and etc. Entrepreneurs are business system thinkers. How do you take the problem, convert it into an opportunity? Who's your customer? How do you reach them? What is the shape and size of the product that you have to sell, and how do you create a profit, and how do you build a brand and team, and all these kind of things? Current entrepreneurship programs almost start here, and you can only reach them when they're in their 20s. If you at the maker level, you can reach them when they're 10 years old, and at school you can start to transform these kids, build their courage and confidence. And I want my students to fail. I take them through curated failures where initially they believe they can't do these things. They start to debug things and start to believe that, oh, this is not so far bad. I can deal with it. And that is how you build your confidence through failures. And it should be within their reach, just outside their reach, not too far that they lose hope. So kind of you have to take them through these kind of experiences. So while the maker is a creative one, innovator is a problem solver, and entrepreneur is a value creator, we really need to create ecosystems within schools, communities, colleges, and universities, etc., to create a ongoing system that will attract new people into it, train them, and get them out. And we'll come to ecosystem a little later. I started my research with college students. And what I found is that by the time they're in college, the school system has already done its damage. These kids do not believe they can do a lot of things. And that is so hard to watch. These kids who come out thinking, I can only do this, I'm not this, I'm not that. And I believe we need to reach very early on in their life. So I created this program called Zero to Maker, just the first two steps. And as part of my research, I created a maker lab in a box. It had a 3D printer, all the electronics, motors, wheels, soldering irons, and meters, and all these kind of things, all in one box. And I created multiple such maker labs in a box and ran experiments in rural government schools. So 10 schools in Malaysia with support from Asian Development Bank and Government of Malaysia, and 7 schools in India with support from L&T, Schneider Electric, uh, in villages around Mysore. So we brought 6 students and 2 teachers, ran a workshop, gave them the lab, asked them to take it back home, play with it, come back after 6 months and show what you have done. So this is in Malaysia. These are 13 and 14-year-old children. In the workshop, the first day, their first job was to assemble the 3D printer, which came as a kit. So each school team got a kit, and we had to teach them how to hold a screwdriver. And most of them did not speak English. And you can see they're all primarily from their attire, they're all fairly rural part of the country, from the rural part of the country. Then they learned CAD. They learn how to design certain things like name tags and something very simple like phone stands and such, and print before lunch on day one, all in 4 hours. Okay. And these kids had no blocking in their thinking that they cannot do anything, but adults have that. Children don't. So it's so much easier to deal with it. And this was, of course, supported by ADB and the government of Malaysia and such. The experiment in Mysore was harder because these kids had never touched a computer. These schools did not have computers. So L&T helped us give them computers. Actually, the first time they ever touched a computer was in the workshop. We had to teach them how to use a mouse and type in Google and all that. And within the 2 days, they did exactly the same thing. They were putting together CAD and for the first application that they learned on a computer was 3D CAD. The second was programming for Arduino, basically in C. And it was amazing to see they could actually do this, in no time. Uh, I ran this experiments even in very expensive schools like Phillips Exeter in New Hampshire here. What you see is that even though these kids are from families with iPhone, iPad, iMac, all those kind of things, internally they're exactly the same kids as you saw in villages in Mysore. Okay. So what I was primarily measuring in these kids were, one is how do they learn, their self-learning skills, their curiosity, research abilities, and such. Uh, Social engagement, how do they work with others, collaborate, in leadership skills, engagement with others. Innovation skills, how do you solve problems, critical thinking, technology, design, uh, how to create solutions for problems. Then entrepreneurship attitudes, the self-efficacy, which is a confidence, resilience, uh, opportunity sensing and such. So I've been collecting this data since my research in 2012. uh, what you find is that when you collect the data you do before and after, you start to see a shift in their confidence. The on average it goes from 53 to 67. This is all in 2-day, 3-day program. and you start to see the standard deviation come down and the average going up. So same thing with innovation skills. And this was an interesting thing we noticed. On average, girls start saying they're not as confident as boys. Of course, they're equally capable. There's no difference in the capabilities. Primarily, what they have heard, they've been exposed to saying, oh, boys can do something different than more than girls, which is not true. It is just that that's an impression, but that at that age, uh, uh, she doesn't have anyone else to give a different word. So she starts to believe unless you change it, you may lose the kid because she may not realize the kind of things that she can do as an adult. So next thing is to create ecosystems in places. The ecosystems primarily consist of three parts. One is a center, which is a space with facilities, tools, materials, books, all the machines uh, and such. Second is community of mentors, leaders, learners, all they who help each other. When they fail, they help them get back up and such. And over time, the culture of innovation, a culture of entrepreneurship. So we talk about it at MIT every 10 years, the whole student body is replaced. Uh, but the ecosystem stays. That's because the culture is so strong that we infect the next generation. Every new one who comes in, gets transformed. And if you can create the culture that can transform and create a standing wave of changing changes that happen to anyone new coming in. So as an experiment, this is all my thesis experiments. I ran experiments in three colleges in India, in Muzaffarnagar, in UP, Varnanagar in Maharashtra, and in Trivandrum in Kerala. So here I taught these kids, college students, for 5 weeks after the college for 2 hours every day. And after the first year, they created 11 startups, and this is after 4 years they had up to reach up 21. After about six or something, they had reached about 36 startups. And the interesting thing is, one kid started some five startups. Most of them failed. Okay, it really doesn't matter, because he infected 11 others. So that means the green ones are the kids I taught, and the white ones are they ones who did not come to my class, but they were influenced by these kids. So this infection ratio is what we are really, really looking at. That is what actually grows the community and grows the ecosystem. Now they have an ecosystem there. Same thing in schools. We taught 60 kids in schools in Malaysia. In the 10 schools, in 9 months, there were 150 kids who were designing and creating things. In Mysore, it actually really was fun. So we had to give them computers, and we we took college students who were graduates, jobless. We trained them and asked them to be in the school as mentors, because most of the teachers did not know how to teach any of these things. So and the mentors are almost at the similar age, so they don't have a problem in saying, I don't know, let's learn together. But teachers have that problem, so in saying, I don't know. So these kids, college students, spend time with them. In about 6 months, there were 1,000 students who were infected, and they were making these IoT devices and Bluetooth controlled robots and all these kind of things. Imagine, these were 6 months back, they hadn't touched a computer. Okay. And this is the Minister of Education on East Timor. And I went to Delhi and I created a innovation lab with UNDP. And we primarily taught college students from Delhi, youth, and took them out into the farms and fields to solve problems and teach them how to solve problems. And now those became mentors for the schools. So trying to create, reaching two generations at the same time. And this is all of us after the workshop. During COVID, I used to do these kind of things online, where I sent out kits of materials and teach them online. And I really love going out into these places like South Africa and teach these kids. Even in the US, there are poorer communities where I go run these kind of programs in Manchester, Puerto Rico. Uh, And I really focus on girls' education. There are places where work done research workshop for girls this is in a village in Vietnam. So I ran about over 170 workshops over the last 14 years in all kinds of places and created these ecosystems which are very cheap, very low cost, very grassroots. What I learned are we are leaving behind so many kids, almost 90-95% of the kids without, we're actually killing their innate abilities rather than building on it. And then their performance, your potential to performance gap is so huge because they all have the same potential, but most of them do not reach the potential, perform to their potential. So that's because early engagement is so needed. If you can create ecosystems that start to change them, if you can reach them very early on, you can start to change their life trajectory itself. So currently, I'm working with the University of Ehime and Ehime Prefecture in Japan to create local regional ecosystems where you teach university students and use the university students to go teach in schools, thereby uh, bringing in a feedback of a lot more school students now want to go to college. And when they go to college, many of them take up jobs, create startups, become faculty, all these kind of things. But they all start with transforming them at school. So yeah, I created all these kind of comic books to go in teach kids, introduce them to technology and such. But primarily we set up labs, go train teachers and mentors, and each week the kid gets one of these subjects and they come to class and work on these projects to learn different aspects of it. And they do hands-on projects, they do multiple capstone project and primarily create a portfolio, a proof of their skills online, just so that when they apply to college or internship or jobs or something, they can show these are the things I can do. So that is primarily what I do. Currently, I'm working on creating projects. We have already created programs. Uh, this month, next month, I'm teaching in Berkeley and Khan schools, Khan Academy schools in California. And we are running multiple online programs in India for school kids. And of course, my primary work now is in Japan. Last year I spent about 4 months teaching in 30 schools right across Japan, going to different places and setting up these kind of things. So with that, uh, any questions? I can take my email and contact information is right there. And thank you so much.